at the bottom of Payal from the days yesterday, and we're up to the Gemara. Now the Mishnah started. The Mishnah started with a case of Hanitnin Bifnim Shenis Arvu Benitnin Bechutz. You have dam that of a carbon like a par held blood. Where are you supposed to spritz that blood? You're supposed to spritz that blood bifnim on the mizbech apnim, and you confused it with dam of nitnin bechutz, like a carbon oila. Like most carbonis, the dam has to be spritzed on the outside mizbech. Zogt gemara yishpuchu le'amu. You gotta pour it out. There's no solution for it. And the obvious question is, in all the earlier cases of a taruvas, Rabbi Lazar said, "What's the problem? Why don't you spritz them both bifnim, and you'll consider the oila like it's water, right? Right. And that was the whole Rabbi Lazar. Never you have one that doesn't belong. You say right like it's mine. Here's totally Rabbi Eliezer doesn't say his Eitzah. That's the Gemara's question. So Zokt the Gemara, v'niflik nami Rabbi Eliezer b'ha. Why doesn't Rabbi Eliezer say here the same thing he said by the previous, that you could just spritz them both in both places and you'll say right? Zokt the Gemara. Okay, so let's see. What would Rabbi Eliezer have suggested? Either he would say, Neisiv b'chutz, first spritz both the damim b'chutz, and then take them both and spritz them on the mizbech apnim. That you can't do. You know what? Because there's an order of operation. There's a lechatchiladic way to do things. Just like when the oil and the chatas got mixed together, you always spritz the dam chatas first on the kronish of the mizbech. Well, so too, kach mitzvah lahaktim panim lechutz, panim lechutz. If you have two damim like you have over here, even if they weren't mixed, one dam has to be spritzed b'fnim, one has to be spritzed b'chutz. You always give precedence to the dam that has to be spritzed b'fnim. So even if you knew which one was which, you would first do the avodas hapnim, and then you do the avodas hachutz. So you have to go inside first. And if you go inside, the problem is now you have the problem of bringing dam that doesn't belong in the heichal, it belongs in the azara, and now you brought it into the heichal. So let's see what happens. Let's spritz both damim on the mizbech apnimi, and then spritz both damim on the mizbech hachitzoni. Zokt Gemara, there's a problem. You know what? Because everybody agrees that chatos, and there are those who even say osham. If you take the dam of the chatas and osham that needed to be spritzed on the mizbech hachitzoni, and you brought that dam into the heichal, it automatically becomes possible. Kivan dika chatos v'osham. The chi nichnas daman psulim. If you take the dam of those karbanis into the heichal, it will be possible. So, yes, for all other karbanis, if it's an oilo or a shlomim that got mixed in together with the dam of a pnimi, you could taka do that, bring it in first. But there's two karbanis that you wouldn't be able to do that with. That would be the chatas and the osham. So therefore, Rabbi Eliezer didn't want to publicize this eitzah at all, because he's afraid people will do it across the board, even when they're not supposed to do it, even by a chatas and a nosham, and that would lead to a disaster. So therefore, Rabbi Eliezer didn't suggest his eitzah at all. Now it's interesting to note that our Mishnah we just learned had a three-way machlokes as to what damim, the carbon of what damim, the damim of which carbon become possible if they enter the azara. There was the Rabbi Kiva holds all damim. Clearly, we're not working with Rabbi Kiva. There was the Chum who said only the dam of the chatas, right? And then there was the third sheet of the Chachamim of Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer says afa osham shnem b'chatz kosham. So it's Rabbi Eliezer l'shitasi, right? Since Rabbi Eliezer holds that the dam of the chatas and the dam of an osham, they would be a problem. So therefore, he didn't suggest that you do his eitzah anywhere, because if you do it and it becomes the thing to do, it might get done for a chatas and osham, and that would be possible. Beautiful. Shehaya Rabbi Kiva. What did Rabbi Kiva say? That all karbonis, if their dam entered the heichel lechaper to be mechaper, we'll see what that means. Then that carbon the dam becomes possible. Now, what is the makar? Which pasuk says this? So we have to look at the pasuk inside. The pasuk is in the sugya of chatos, and the context is that we're talking about a carbon chatos here. And then in the middle of the sugya of carbon chatos, the Torah injects the following pasuk: V'chol chatos asher yuva midama el oil moed lichaper b'kodesh. Any chatos whose dam is brought into the heichal, lo yisei you're not allowed to eat it anymore. But it must be destroyed. So it's a mefurish pasuk, right? This halach is a mefurish pasuk. But where is the mefurish pasuk talking about? The chol chatos. So where did Rabbi Akiva get from the chol chatos, where the Torah is specifically declaring that this halacha applies to a chatos? How would Rabbi Akiva know that this applies equally to all karbanos? That is the question. Zog to Gemara. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Mashal the Rabbi Akiva lama davardaim. Let me explain to you the mashal to understand how Rabbi Akiva perceives this pasuk. The Talmud shemozag l'Rabbi b'chan. There was a Talmud. His Rebbe had wine there. The wine was pure, undiluted wine, which has to be diluted. And he went and poured water, not stam water, warm water, into the Rebbe's wine, so that now it's diluted wine. After he does it, or while he does that, the Rebbe tells him, the Amaloi mizoigli. The Rebbe tells him mizoigli, or mizoigli b'chamen. If you look at the lotion of the Shita Mukubet, says mizoigli b'chamen. So what does he mean to say here? Amar Loi, the Talmud asks the Rebbe, Bameh, what should I be moizig you with? Amar Loi, he tells him, the Rebbe tells the Talmud, Loi b'chamen anu asukin achshav. If we're asuk now in chamen, if you are already in the process of being moizig b'chamen, and I'm telling you to be moizig, obviously, I mean to say, be moizig in many ways, not just the way you bring moizig, but be moizig bein b'chamen bein b'tzayim. When you look at the pasuk that says v'chol chatos, michti b'chatos haskinan v'asi. If you look at the earlier psukim prior to this pasuk, prior to Beikir Vav Chav Gimel, it's talking all about. It's talking about the carbon chatos. The pasuk right before is called Zocher B'Kainim Yoichel Oisa Kodesh Kodesh Shemi. We're in the middle of discussing the parsha of the chatos. So there's a lot of ways that our minds could look at this pasuk and not come to the same conclusion as Rabbi Akiva. I agree with you on that. But when it comes to how to analyze a pasuk, there's no handbook for it. We just got to take what they tell us.
What about a binyan av?
I agree with that. That's what the Gemara says.
Isn't this a classic case of a binyan av?
How is this a binyan av?
Just like it says for this mitzvah, so too it's relevant.
Oh, so why did you say the other karbanos? Just like by chatos, if it's bala kodesh, why shouldn't that be a binyan av to all other karbanos?
Right.
Well, you can make so many type of differences. You can chatos is different because chatos is mechaper. So
okay, but originally you can argue on it. That's fine. So somebody could not hold of that binyan av, right? But correct. Originally you can. Why don't you say it's a baseline to start with? Pardon me.
It's a good baseline to start with.
It's right. It's one of the 13.
Here, I don't know. These are all good questions. When it comes to limudim, we wouldn't always at first thought interpret it the way we read it in the Gemara. Sometimes to us it seems random. Why wouldn't you go this way? How do you look at the bus? I don't know the answer.
I would have said this would be the starting point, that it's a binyan av.
And that's always by default normally the starting point. And then the Gemara comes on to this limud.
Right.
Usually always starts with the binyan av. I hear. So I think Moti was pointing out a minute ago. It really has a lot to do, it depends a lot on what the gear says. If you're going like our Gemara, the Rebbe said mozikli without saying bechamen, and then the Talmud asked bameh, and then Amaloi loy bechamen and the if I tell you the mozikli, stama, and we're already dealing with chamen, I probably mean to add soinin as well. But if you go like the Shita Mukabetzes, who the Rebbe said while he's being moizik bechamen, the Rebbe said moizik bechamen, so there it's even more outstanding. Yeah, what does he say?
If you're dealing with chamen already, then you don't have to say chamen. The fact that he said chamen was he saying you can also do with chamen.
Right, but that's if he said chamen, right? What if he just said mezagli? But also, why are you saying mezagli? I'm in the middle of big moizik. Obviously, I mean to say, add something else to the mix, right? But I might argue, no, maybe I said it because I don't want chamen, maybe I only want something. Like, Xeris, there's no YouTube video that can tell you how to do it. You know, I watched a YouTube video how to program my garage door opener. For that, YouTube is gewaltig. YouTube will never tell you how to access a puzzle. Here, Ronnie told me yesterday that if there'd be a YouTube video on how to dash up psukim, it would have been so much easier. But we didn't have YouTube in those days. Remember that he told me yesterday. Halavai, we should have YouTube how to dash up psukim when we go out. Zok Gemara, you know who would be protest against it? Art Scroll. Zok Gemara, Hachanami. Michti, let's analyze the puzzle. Michti, bechatos askinan v'asi. Look at the context. These psukim are all talking about a carbon chatos. So why does it say when it gets to this halacha v'chol chatos? Chatos the koser v'chaman alam. So that's the moshel, because it says v'chol chatos. So Meyer Tenenbaum pointed out. So the Rebbe did say v'chol chatos. So we're comparing it where the Rebbe just said mezoigli plain, right? But here the Rebbe said mezoigli chatos. So it stems better with the girsa of the shita. So anyway, chatos the cause of Achman Alamali. If we're talking about chatos and the whole context is chatos, why did it specify chatos again? Ela lav chatos kamin Allah. I obviously don't mean only chatos. Ela kol kadashim. So that's the similarity. The good news is the Gemara doesn't like this drasha either. Matzka flora avhuna bareja bishua michti. Israbul kol kachim legabe mizbeach leinyam meriko shtiv. One of the halachas that we learn in the prior psukim, in the parsha of Chatos, is that halacha is the keli, the pot with which you cook the Chatos. To eat it, for instance, the kohanim want to eat it. The pot that they use to cook it has to be kashered. It has to be kashered. We learn that not only does the pot that a chatos is cooked in need to be kashered, the pot that any carbon is cooked in needs to be kashered. I guess the beliefs of Yotze could be a problem too. So you see, the context is not like you just said that we're talking about chatos until this point. For carrot, all the halachas that we've been discussing up until this point that apply to a chatos, we're saying applies to all karbonis. So over here as well, why would we assume any differently by this halacha? By the previous halacha of Hagola, we say it applies to all karbonis. So why shouldn't this next halacha about Yuva Midama Eloil Moed Lechaper becomes possible? Why wouldn't you say that that's also speaking by all other karbonis? Chatos the kozer v'achman alamali. Shemami no chatos in midi achrini loy. Fakert. This says, that's totally the opposite. That the Torah is saying, don't apply this to other karbonis. Only apply it to the chatos. So, hola damya, you can't compare b'chol chatos ella l'talmud shemozek l'rabbi bein b'chamen bein mitzayim. There was a Talmud that was pouring tzai chamen and tzai tzayim, just like in our sugya. It's being tzai by chatos and tzai by other karbonis. That's what the context was. And in Amaloi, when the Rebbe told him, Al tim zoigli elochamen, the Rebbe says, I don't want tzayim, only be mojik b'chamen. That's what happened over here. We were talking about all karbonis, and now the Torah is saying for this halacha, kol chatos only. So for carrot, Rabbi Akiva, if anything, the pasuk should tell you that this halacha only applies to a carbon chatos. Elatamid Rabbi Akiva mechatos v'kol chatos. The diak is it could have said the chatos ashiyava midama. It says v'chol chatos. V'chol is a riboy to include all karbonos. The Tanya we learned chatos only chatos kache minayin. How do we know what all karbonos? Talmud loimer kol chatos. Kadishim kalim minayin. How do you know to include even kadishim kalim? Talmud loimer v'chol chatos. Divrei Rabbi Akiva. So the limit isn't from this machal lamad or v'daima, which we were scratching our heads to understand any well. It's from a more conventional limud. It's from the kol and the vichol. That's marba not only chatos but all kodesh kachim, and then not only kodesh kachim but even kodeshim kachim. Divrei Rabbi Akiva. Amar la Rabbi Yosy Aglili. Rabbi Yosy Aglili told Rabbi Akiva, "Afilu ata marba kolayim kulay. You could bring me ribuyim from today till tomorrow. Eini shomei alach. I will still refuse to accept from you that this halacha that dam is brought in to the heichal apostles. I will refuse to accept from you only legabe the carbon chatos. Eini shomei alach elo chatos. I would say it only applies to a chatos. So just right off the bat, if you read this, if I asked you what's Rabbi Yosy Aglili shita, he would say we learned from the chol chatos that it only applies to a chatos. Right? I mean, he's pretty clear in what he holds. But then we have a very interesting conversation over here. Ein li ela chatas yochid. I would think that this isser only applies to a chatas yochid. Does anybody know what type of animal a korban chatas yochid is? Usually, is it a male or a female animal? It's a female animal. A normal is a female animal. So ein li ela chatas yochid. I'm sorry? That's right. What about a chatas tzibur? What about a chatas tzibur like a par helam davar shel tzibur? Minayin, how do you know that this halacha, no, a par helam davar shel tzibur belongs b'fnim? A chatas tzibur minayin, how do you know it applies even to a chatas tzibur that's supposed to be b'chutz, which is actually for a male animal, like the karbonis under regolim? There's a lot of chatois that are brought, but these are all things that need to be brought outside. Yosy as well. I'm not sure if that's called the chatas tzibur, but that's also something, right? Okay, so minayin Talmud loymar kol chatos, all chatos, saya chatas yochid, saya chatas tzibur, and then the Gemara says again, ve'inli lechatas zocher, chatas tekeva minayin. Now that's going to be a question right away. What do you mean ve'inli lechatas zocher? If you know chatas yochid, by definition, we just said that that's a nekeva. So we'll have to explain this Gemara in a minute. Talmud loymar v'chol, frekdem klapalaya. Your discussion makes no sense, because how could you say ein li ela chatas zocher when we already said that it for sure includes a chatas yochid, which is in the keva? This is what Rabbi Yosy Aglili must mean. Ein li ela chatas nekeva. I would have only thought a chatas nekeva, chatas zocher minayin Talmud loymar v'chol chatas. That's the whole thing. You don't mix in the chatas yochid v'tzibur. Zog to Gemara. So what you're telling me is basically the pasuk of B'chol Chatos is to tell us that this thing, the dam that comes inside, passes the carbon, is referring to only karbonis of Chatos. But that's not true, because Rabbi Yosy Aglili, we'll see in a moment, uses this pasuk to tell us a completely different halacha that has nothing to do with dam coming inside wrongfully, nothing at all. And let's see how Rabbi Yosy Aglili interprets this pasuk. V'atanya Rabbi Yosy Aglili, kol ha'inyan kuloi einim medaber ela b'parim hanisrafim usirim hanisrafim. This pasuk has nothing to do with dam of achatas hachitzayin that's brought inside. It's actually only speaking about parim hanisrafim usirim hanisrafim. What are parim hanisrafim usirim hanisrafim? Par haladav shel tzibur, par kohen Mashiach, paris of Yom Kippurim. What do you do with it? You spritz its dam on the mizbech hapnimi, and then the meat is taken michutz lamachana and it's burnt there. Right? That's the halacha. That's what you do with it. And the pasuk is teaching you that if it became possible, for some reason, if psul happened in this carbon, lisraif pisulein abeis abira. You know where you burn it? You don't burn the psulim outside like you would do if it's kosher. If it's possible, you burn it inside the azara. Chiddush, right? And we'll see in a moment where you see it in the pasuk. And and if you eat the meat of that carbon chatos, you'll be over a loisasa. Now let's have a look at the pasuk inside and see a whole new version of how you read this pasuk. Any carbon chatos that by design you're supposed to bring the dam inside. In other words, the param hapinimium, the param anasrafim, musir anasrafim, the halach is loy achel. No matter if they're kosher or if they're posel, there's a lot to eat from their meat. And if they become posel, ba'ishti saref, right there in the asar. That's how Rabbi Yosy dashes his pasuk. Nothing to do with the chatas achitzoin that was mistakenly brought. The dam was mistakenly brought into the asar. So, Frank the Gemara. So, how is Rabbi Yosy really going to know this halacha that a carbon chatas achitzoin whose dam brought inside? How does he know that that's possible? Amr loy chatas shenichnas double of fnai v'lefnim minayin. How do you know that? Amr lahem. That's a completely different pasuk. Hein loy huva. This is a very famous story. This is a very famous story where they pass about a Yumiyayim Aluim. Aaron and his children passed a carbon, and Moshe Rabbeinu admonished them. Madua loy hevesa es hachatas bimkaim hakodesh. And then, why didn't you bring the carbon? Why did you get rid of the carbon? Hein loy huva stama el hakodesh penima. It's not like the dam of the carbon was brought into the heichal. And that would have been a legitimate reason to pass the carbon. You didn't do it. So Moshe, why did you burn it? Why did you pass it? It was a good carbon. So you see from that pasuk that if you bring the dam of a chatas inside, it will pass it. So now the Gemara's kasha is that Rabbi Yosy clearly holds that this pasuk has nothing to do with the problem of bringing dam inside. So what's he handling here with Akiva about the pasuk is only referring to achatos? It has nothing to do with this. You're right. Rabbi Yosy is saying, if you ask me, this pasuk has nothing to do with this shaila. But you want to learn that this pasuk does have to do with this shaila, at least limit it to only achatos. Eini shemei elach elachatos. Zok the Gemara fighter. Here we're going to get into very complex kal v'chomers, our favorite challenges of Zevachim. Chatos shekibel dama b'shnei koisos. You were makabel the dam, instead of fitting all the blood into one kois, you needed two koisos to gather all the dam. So now that you have two koisos full of dam of the same carbon, and Yotze echad mohen l'chutz, one of these koisos of dam was taken out of the azar. That's another psul that we're going to learn about. That if dam or basar, if any part of a carbon leaves the azara, it becomes possible. So one of these damim left the azara, that dam is possible, but apnimi kosher. The dam, the kosh of dam that never left azara, that remains kosher. So taking dam chutz passes it, but not the carbon. Nichdas echad behemlift. What if some of the dam you took into the heichal? So Rabbi Yosy Aglili machshir b'chitzon. Rabbi Yosy Aglili says it passes the dam that went inside, but it doesn't pass the carbon. The Chachamim poistlin, the Chachamim hold the whole carbon is possible. Rabbi Yosy Aglili. Rabbi Yosy Aglili came to argue on the Chachamim with the kal v'chomers. Just the last case. Rabbi Yosy Aglili. Ma dechazoy in b'makom shemachshava paiselas b'chutz. If you didn't take the dam outside, you only had kavana to spritz the dam outside. That's a case of pigel of shaloi ben koimai. So madach, if you only had a machshava to take the dam out, if you only had a machshava to take the dam outside, if you only had kavanah to take the dam outside, is the whole carbon possible? Yes, that's pigel, right? Nevertheless, if you actually took the dam outside, you don't say that the whole carbon is possible. You say that dam is possible. So if you merely thought to take the dam outside, it would pass the whole carbon as pigel. If you actually take the dam outside, it doesn't pass the carbon. Only passes that dam. So If you have kavod while you're shechting a carbon, that you're going to bring the dam into the heichal, that's not pigel. That's not chostom klaiman. There's no problem at all there. So if the machshava wouldn't passel at all, einay din shalai nasa is a meshuyer kinichnas. Why did that passel klaiman? If it would be more logical to suggest that if you took the dam out, it should passel the carbon, and you chachamim agree it wouldn't passel. So that's how it's clear that Chacham's only arguing in the second case.
One's all, one's half.
No, in each case it's only half.
All.
No, I'd come on to make a zrika outside. Not to get all, just not to do zrika. So clearly, we both agree that bechutz should be more chomer than bifnim, because bechutz will be subject to pickle, but bifnim isn't. So why do you paskin that it's more chomer bifnim? Because the dam bifnim will pass the whole carbon, the dam bechutz will only paskin will only passel the dam that was taken bechutz. Okay, so there's your kavod. Niknas lechaper, av api shaloi kiper is possible. Now we have another try. It says in the pasuk, kol chatos hashiyuvi lechaper means you had in mind to make a zrika. You were going to make a zrika there. You didn't just take it in for fun. You took it in with the purpose of zrika. If you didn't take it in for the purpose of zrika, it actually wouldn't pass on the carpet. This whole psul of bringing it into the heichal is only if you brought it in for the purposes of zrika. Zok the Hilge Mishnah weiter. Nichnas lechaper, ava bishaloi keeper. If your intent was to make zrika, even though you didn't do the zrika yet, the moment you walk into the heichal with the dam becomes possible. Nichnas lechaper, ava bishaloi keeper, possible. Divrei Rabbi Eliezer, that's the sheet of Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Shimon Omer achi yichaper. Dam, merely taking dam into the heichal doesn't passel. Dam that goes into the heichal that passels is only if you made zrika. Rabbi Shimon Omer achi yichaper. Rabbi Yehuda Omer im hichnes shogi kosher. Now that seems to be from coming out of left field. Shogi kosher. What does he hold about the machlokes that we just quoted? He's interjecting into a machlokes that's talking about if you brought it the chaper but didn't do it. And he's talking about a third thing. Does he have an opinion? Legabi Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Shimon. That the Gemara is going to discuss. Kol adam and psulim shenasnu al gavei mizbeach. Well, here it is. We know there's a halacha that if something goes wrong in avoid and it becomes tamei, the tzitz is maratza. Zok the Mishnah, the tzitz is only maratza on a problem of tumah, but on the other psulim, there the tzitz has no impact on. So if you had dam that was possible, for instance, it was Yotze, and you put it on the mizbeach, loy hurts the tzitz. The tzitz doesn't fix that. Elo ala tamei, only tamei. Shatzitz maratz ala tamei, ve'ena maratz ala Yotze. Tzitz will not fix the problem of Yotze, it only fixes the problem of tamei. Zog to Gemara. Tanya Amar B'Shagli. Kal v'chever. You have a kal v'chever. Uma b'mokayim shemachshava poiselos b'chutz. Ma de chutz is very chomer because a machshava of chutz pasels as pigel. Nevertheless, loy pasel dam shebechutz esh shebefnim. Clearly, if dam goes out, that dam is pasel, but the carbon remains kosher. Mokayim she'ein machshava poiselos b'fnim. If you have kavana to do this rika inside the hechel, that wouldn't be a problem of pigel of chutzum kailan. Einay din shelo yisrael dam shebefnim shebechutz. So actually taking the dam into the hechel surely shouldn't passel the carbon. It should only passel that dam. Amrloi, the Chachamim answered, we reject your kal v'chomer. You know why? Because the pasuk tells us to. Harei oimer asher yuva midama afilu miktsas dama. The pasuk says even if only part of the dam of a carbon comes into the hechel, it will pass on the carbon. It doesn't say Ashiyave Dama, Ashiyave Midama. Amar Lahem. So he told him back, Kal v'chomer liyotze. So surely, if the dam goes out, it should also pass on everything. And we know that it doesn't. Now, as an aside, we just learned earlier in the Mishnah that the Makar that Rabbi Yosy Aglili has for dam that comes into the Kodesh, it comes into the Kodesh, is not from the pasuk of Kol Chatos Ashiyav Midama. It's from Hein Lehuva Dama. Hein Lehuva Dama means olive blood. It doesn't say midama in your Rabbi Yosy Kludis pasuk. It says midama in the Rabbanim's pasuk, but in the Rabbi Yosy Kludis pasuk it doesn't say midama. So that's why he doesn't have the tanya that they told him Asher Yuva midama, because he learns this halacha from a pasuk which is it says dama, not midama. So Zok Gemara Amalev Kavachim Yotze Meata. Now we can make a Kavachim Yotze. Uma b'mokim she'ein machshava paiselas, which is b'fnim. Madach pnim is not chomer, because having a machshava to make the shvika b'fnim wouldn't pass out people. Nevertheless, paisel dam sheb'fnim es sheb'chutz. Dam that was actually brought into the heichal will pass the whole carbon. Mokim shemachshava paiselas b'chutz. If you bring the dam outside, where if you would have thought to bring the dam outside, it would pass the whole pigel. Surely that should be more chomer. Why, Taka, don't you say that if the dam went outside, it should pass the whole carbon? Why don't you say that? They told him because we have another pasuk. The pasuk is a guardrail to a renegade Kavachim. Amrloi, Harayu Aimer, Asher Yuva, Hanichnas, Paisel, Ve'ina Yotze, Paisel. It says, Asher Yuva Midama. This whole Zach, that some dam will pass the whole carbon, that's by Yuva. That's if it comes in. But if it leaves the Azara to go to the outside, that doesn't pass. So we learn from the pasuk not to make certain Kavachimers. Like I said, the pasuk is a guardrail to a renegade Kavachim. So now that we have our parameters, what the Gemara always does is, the Gemara says, as the Gemara brings psukim as those guardrails, you can't go here with the Kavachimer, can't go there with the Kavachimer. So then we try using those anchors to push in another direction. So Frank the Gemara was, hey, Bachshava, Bifnim, Paiselis Mikavachimer. Why Taka doesn't piggle? Why Taka, if you had Kavanah to spritz the dam Bifnim, wouldn't it pass out piggle? Now we have a Kavachimer. Umaba Mokim Shle Posel Dam Shebechutz. As Dam Shebefnim. And we know that from Psukim already. Nevertheless, Machshava Paiselis Bechutz, a machshava pigel pasels. Mokum sheposel dam shebefnim shebechutz, because it says that sheyavei midama. We have a pasuk to anchor that already. So clearly, eino din shedei machshava paselos befnim. So surely a machshava pigel should pasel, even if you had in mind to make this rika befnim. Dr. Gemara, I have a guardrail for that as well. If you remember when we were learning at the beginning of Masechta, the drushes from the pasuk. From B'yom HaShlishi, we learn Me'eda Inyan L'Gufay of Chutz L'Zmanoi T'neyu Inyan L'Chutz L'Kaimoi, and B'yom HaShlishi was referring to Chutz L'Kaimoi. Why would we do such a Mabdazach? Just say Chutz L'Kaimoi. Why say B'yom HaShlishi? Is because the Torah is telling us the pigel of Chutz L'Kaimoi doesn't mean anywhere Chutz L'Kaimoi. It only means Shlishi, a place where you could do three things, a place where in history we found was eligible for three things. Mokam Shiyeh Mishulish, Bedam Bebasar Beimun. Place is where there is a time in history where you can spritz dam there, you could be makriv basar or eat basar there, and you could be makter emun. And that's bechutz, because bisman habama, you would be able to make the zrika, eat the basar of the karbanos, and be makter de emurim all outside. But there was never a time in history where you were supposed to eat basar or be makter emurim on the bimzech hapnimi, on the heichal. So therefore, the heichal will never be a place where chutz limkoymoi will pass al speak. I couldn't give you a logical reason. It's just you don't limudim from psukim. So now you're being dashina on time with the crow. I don't know if we're allowed to do that. We just have to accept what's dictated. If we try using our logic, we're going to get into a lot of trouble. I hear it. I hear it. I hear it. The svara is, if you're still within the kedusha, it shouldn't pass. I hear it. That's using human logic to try to understand kachim. Yeah, I hear this first. We just have to take what the Gemara dictates. We can't. It doesn't always synchronize with how we would analyze it. I agree. Zok to Gemara. Let's try something else. Maybe the machshava of chutz l'mkaymai shouldn't pass al pigel. Why? Uma mokim shepasal dam shebefnim shebechutz. Even by a chomer thing like befnim, we're bringing a little bit of dam befnim passes the whole carbon. Nevertheless, ein machshava peselas befnim, a kavana to make zrika befnim wouldn't create a pigel. Mokim shaloi pasal dam shebechutz shebefnim. When you're talking about chutz, which only the dam that's taken out of the Azara passes, doesn't pass the carbon. Surely the machshava of chutz shouldn't pass it. So there shouldn't be a pigel of machshava b'chutz. Tamad loimer shlishi chutz l'zmanoi pigel chutz l'mkoyim. We have psukim. You're right. You might have a kavachomer to say not, but we have psukim. So we have 4 guardrails. We have a guardrail to say that the machshava of pigel of chutz l'mkoyim passes. The machshava of pigel of inside the heichal does not passel. We have a guardrail that says that Yotze chutz l'azara only passels that, doesn't passel everything. And we have a guardrail that says that if it's brought in to the heichal, it passels everything. So therefore, all of our kal v'chomers that we tried to make in any direction were all blocked because of psukim. Zok the Gemara weiter. Basar hayotze l'chutz passel. Till now we were talking about dam. Now we're talking about basar. Basar of a carbon that left its mechitza, it left the area where it's not, where it's designed to be eaten, whether in the Zara, whether in Yerushalayim, it's going to be possible. But anichnas lefnim kasher, if basar makes its way into the heichal, that doesn't possible at all. Shehebedin, you could have made a kavachomer shaposel that it should be possible. Umaba makom shloi posel dam shabachutz es shebefnim. Madach, if the dam that's bechutz will not pass on the dam that's befnim. Nevertheless, basar ayotze lechutz passel. Basar that went out is going to be passel just like the dam. Mokum shepasel dam shebefnim shebechutz. If you brought the dam into the azar, which would passel the whole carbon, surely basar anichnas befnim and it didn't sheyiv so. At least it should be passel. So again, you have a passel. Hare yomer mi dama. Dafka dam passels the carbon if it was befnim. Dama v'lei basar. This halacha of bifnim causing trouble applies only to dam, not to basar. Look, tomorrow, okay. So let's make a kavachomer in a different direction. Kavachomer me'ata. Uma b'moken shepasel dam shebefnim es shebechutz. Madich dam, if it went bifnim, it passes the whole carbon. Nevertheless, basar anichnas lefnim kosher. Basar that came into the eichel would not passel. Mokem shaloi pasel dam shebechutz es shebefnim. Like if dam was taken out of the azara, basar yosel l'chutz ein din kosher. So therefore, basar that leaves the confines of the azara or Yerushalayim should be kosher and ganzen using this kavachomer. So tomorrow we have another guardrail. Ubasar basada treifa loisaycheli. That pasuk is talking about basar that left its perimeter. It's considered like treifa. You shouldn't eat. Kivin sheyasa basar chutzlam chitzasay nesa. Okay, gavaltim. Zok the Gemara about it. Tana about penima. It says hein loy huva esdama ela kodesh penima. Moshe told him, why would you passel this carbon? Its dam did not come penima. Zok the Gemara ainly ela penima. I would have thought that it would only be possible if it enters the kodesh hakodesh. Heichal minayin. How do you know if the dam only enters the heichal? How do you know that would possible as well? Talmud loimer el hakodesh penima. There's 2 words. There's el hakodesh and there's penima. El hakodesh refers to the heichal. Penima means even further inside, further towards the interior to the kodesh hakodesh. Correct the Gemara. I'm sorry. Oh, that's Gemara's next kasha. The yomer kodesh, val yomer penima. Just say you can't go to the heichal. Kolshkin, you can't go to the kodesh kodeshim. Because let me ask you a question: how are you going to get into the kodesh kodeshim? You're going to be going through the heichal. So Gemara asks Novi's kasha. Just say heichal, and I'll know for sure if it came into the kodesh kodeshim, it'll be possible. Amarava bazev limit al say. You know what it is? If it would have just said al kodesh, I would have said no kodesh means the kodesh kodeshim. So this is penima. Then we say kodesh probably means the heichal, and only because of penima they say kodesh kodeshim. You see that you need 2 psukim because otherwise you would say 1 pasuk refers to the heichal. Midi to have a toishav v'sachir, similar to a shakel of Ataria that we had when we were talking about a Toshev and a Sachir, that if they belong to a Kohen, they wouldn't be able to eat kosher. Titania, Toshev Zeh Kohen Kinyan. A Toshev is an Eved Ivri, can't eat from either. He's an Eved Ivri that had the hole drilled in his ear, and now he's going to remain working for you up until the Yovel. Schir Zeh Kohen Kinyan. That's an Eved Ivri who's in his original 6-year term. Yoimer Toshav. Why did the Torah say a Toshav and a Schir can eat Truma lo yoichel boy? It should have said a Toshav. Someone who's a Nirtzah can't eat. Kosher, someone who's only there for 6 years can't eat. Same question is over here. Yoimer Toshav al Yoimer Schir. Vadi Yoimer. Kani kinyin oilam einoi oichel. If even a Nirtzah can't eat Truma, Kani kinyin shonim like Kosher. And what did the Gemara say there? If it only said Toshav and not Schir, I would have said Toshav is a 6-year guy. But Aval Kanu Kinyan Olam, maybe Yeheyacha. But Schir, the limit al Toshav, Shezeh Kanu Kinyan Olam, Vizeh Kanu Kinyan Shon. And Veinoich. We have a problem. Because let me ask you a question. Why does the Pasuk speak in such a cryptic way? Why didn't the Torah just say Nirtzah? And then I wouldn't have to dash in the Toshav mean this, the Toshav mean that. Say Nirtzah, say what you mean. Why speak in a cryptic fashion? So there, by Toshav Schir, there's a reason to say that the Torah did it in a cryptic fashion. You know why? Because Hazan Trey Gufein. The Toshav is one body, the Schir is another body. We're talking about two different people, right? The Avagab, the Havalei Lekral Michtav Nirtzah. Even though you can ask me, why did the Torah speak cryptic? The Torah should just have said clearly, we're talking about a Nirtzah. And Kol Shekain I would know that a regular Eved Ivri can eat Truma. The Havalei Lekral Michtav Nirtzah Lo Yoichel, and the Idich Asi V'Kal V'Chomer. And I would have been able to figure out that the Schir Sheishanim with a Kal V'Chomer couldn't eat Truma. Yet you can make an argument that the Torah sometimes likes to say things clearly. Milsa the Asi V'Kal V'Chomer, Torah v'kas of the crop. The Torah spoke cryptic because the Torah wanted to directly address the schir. I could have said Nirtzah only, and you would have known schir with the kal v'chomer. So the Torah said it in this cryptic fashion, so you have to speak out Toshav and schir, because the Torah sometimes will address directly, even though it's something you could have learned out. With the kal v'chomer. I'm sorry? Are you mixing logic in here again? I understand. I hear what you're saying. But there is a concept of milsa to also become chaymer, tarach b'asher b'kra. Elahacha, but here you can't even make such an argument because this isn't even a kal v'chaymer. Going into the Kodesh Kodashim is not also because of the kal v'chaymer from Eichel, because when you went into the Kodesh Kodashim, by definition you walked through the Eichel. So now there's no reason for the Torah to speak cryptic. The Torah should have just said Eichel. Elahacha, even the ifso b'Eichel. Lefnaim lefnim my boy. It's not a kal v'chomer from Heichel to lefnaim lefnim. It's bechlal masayim ono. You got to walk through the Heichel to get there. Oh, ela my boy ela nitzra ela mederich mishupash. So the boy maybe came around the back. Maybe came through a side door. Amalei Rava said you can't say that because habok sivbei going around the back actually wouldn't even possible. Hey le huva midama. Huva means it came into their chamela. Came in through the front door. If it came in through the back door, it wouldn't be possible anyway. So it's not going through the front door. So there's no reason why the pasuk didn't just tell us straight out. Heichel. Allah Rava, a huge chiddush. Kol midi de chashav lefnai v'lefnim lemisl b'heichel. Let's say I decided I am taking this time into the Kodesh Kodashim, and I walk into the Heichel, and I'm about to walk into the Kodesh Kodashim, and I change my mind. And I turn around. It won't puzzle. It will not be puzzle for bringing it into the Heichel because it doesn't count. It only counts if that was your intent. So therefore, you need a kal v'chomer. Because if I was planning to bring it into the Kodesh Kodashim, walking through the Heichel does not pass it. So therefore, you still have the svara of something that's in the kal v'chomer, tarach the cost of love. Let's stop here because it's already 10-7, and we'll learn. So we're learning an hour before Mincha on Shabbos, and we're also learning 6:45 Motzei Shabbos. You know why we're so early? Because we have to be finished by 7:30. Why? Because I'm also learning with Finkelshire, and they're not up to here. They're a block behind. So I have to start with them at that point, so I told him, you know what? First, I'm going to learn with my item, and then we'll learn with you at 7:30. So we'll start at 6:45. We'll finish the blot, and if they have to wait a couple of minutes, so they'll wait a couple of minutes. Yeah, now before midnight. Everybody should have an awesome Shabbos. Yosy Lipschitz is making a knife this week. Yeah, making a knife. So that's